Hey, this is Helen Dawson, and you're listening to the Innovation Crowd podcast. Businesses are looking to reinvent themselves, be more digital, more sustainable, and thrive in a volatile world. Yet most corporate innovation programs don't deliver. In fact, many don't even survive after their second birthday. On this show, I sit down with the experts to discuss the strategies that work, so you don't have to learn the hard way. So come and join me in the Innovation Crowd. Welcome back. So today's guest is going to talk to us about the transformation of an existing business into, I guess, the digital version that it would be if it were born today. So welcome, Carolyn. Carolyn is Group Marketing Director of Specsavers. And why don't you introduce yourself, Carolyn, and give us a view of what your remit is?
Okay, thanks, Helen. Thanks for inviting me along. So I'm relatively new in the world of Specsavers. Specsavers is a 40-year-old business next year, so it's going into its real middle age now. And I'm a year and a half in, so relatively newbie member of the team. Group Marketing Director is a little bit misleading as a title. There are marketing directors in each of the 4 regions who are trading directors who are responsible for what goes on in that market. I'm responsible for stuff that goes across all of them. And of course, what that means is really the websites, CRM, data analytics, all that kind of good stuff. And that's kind of my remit. There are 11 markets for Specsavers. I think it's a much bigger business than a lot of people expect. £4 billion business, thousands of staff, millions of customers, 40 million customers. I think people think of their little Specsavers and imagine it to be that. And in a way it is that, and that's its sort of secret sauce. Is the shop that you go into is owned by a retail partner and an optician as a joint, a couple of people who own the store, but all the back end, all of the supply chain and glasses and marketing and all of that stuff is done by Specsavers as a group. So it works brilliantly, and I think that's why they've been so successful, actually.
So how are you using digital to improve the customer journey?
So the digital world of Specsavers is really, really in its infancy. I think there's something terrifying, like they sent their first customer email centrally in like 2016. So it was a very, it's a very owned and run, locally owned and run business, and the customers are their customers. So it is really at the beginning of its journey. Now, though, post-pandemic, which is, has been helpful for a lot of bricks and mortar retailers, we have now almost half of our appointments that are made for optical or hearing care needs in the stores are made online. So the biggest job at the moment that's being done by digital is that sort of front end part of the customer journey. And the website, each of the 11 markets has its own website. It's working off centralized technology. But about 50% of all appointments. And that's been a really big change for the business, because everybody just used to ring up. Hello, is that Kath? I want to come in, So our CRM recall program is hugely important. And that then drives all of this traffic to the store. And so the first point of call, really that triage journey.
Yeah.
And that's really it. The e-commerce business is 2% of the revenue.
I'm surprised it's even that much, actually.
Well, the majority of it is contact lenses. The contact lenses are very straightforward. Once you've got your prescription, you can go shopping around and go, I'm a minus 0.175 plus 2.5, whatever, and you can just go and get the AccuView daily, wherever you want them. So that's as long as you've got prescription. So that's why that part of the business is the biggest. The actual glasses part of the organization is really, the e-commerce world is actually really small. Although this is what's now going to require a crystal ball from us, because whilst the technology is advancing and that you can already have a test online, not in the UK because it's governed by there's quite strong healthcare governance in the UK, but in other markets, other countries like Japan, for instance, places, you can have a test online, and that is available, also will be available obviously on your phone. And so the big bets for us are just around how quickly will that happen. And the statistic that scares everybody the most, I think, in our business is the largest cohort of glasses wearers will be the millennials by 2030. So people think of millennials as, we still think of millennials as kind of this young, funky gang, but they're going to be well into their 40s by 2030. And that's when you start having quite complex eye needs, your eyes start to go at that age. So those people shop online. They don't love face-to-face interaction, which is what we are at our heart. And so we have to get ready for them. We really have to get ready for them. Prediction will be about 10% of glasses sold in the next 5 years will be online. And there are some incredibly cool, funky organizations starting up, startups, tech businesses really starting up, fully end-to-end integrated. You've got your prescription. There's a company called Zenni. They sold 12 million pairs of glasses last year. Big business, and that's all online. And it's just fully integrated. They design a bit like Pandora. They design the glasses, they make them, they ship them, and the whole thing. And it's run actually by sort of modern day Mary and Doug Perkins. We're a founder business. I don't know if you know that. So Doug and Mary, who set the business up, are still in the business today, even though Doug was 80 this year. But they're still going strong, and they're there every day, and they're the heart and soul of the business, as is their son John, who's the CEO. But the Zenni founders are the same. It's a husband and wife optometrist team, but they're just a bit younger, so they set up online.
But it's interesting, isn't it? When I opened with being the business you would be if you were born today, then that's almost like the direct comparison of a company that is born today but doesn't have that amazing customer base and heritage and all the things that make Specsavers the business it is.
Yeah. And that's the can we be quick enough to maintain our base? Also, what's happening is aging population, lots of young people now needing glasses. There's a lot of innovation in the glasses space, the actual lens space, where you've got lenses now that are correcting your vision while you're looking. So myopia won't be such of a problem going forward, which is good because it's at epidemic levels with young people now. It was one of the reasons I joined Specsavers, actually, lots of reasons I joined, but one of them was the fact that they just haven't digitally transformed. And not because as a business they've been slow to do that. The customers haven't adopted the technology that would require them to, or that they would feel comfortable doing things online. So what we've got to do over the next 5 years is get ourselves ready for that 10-year picture. And that just makes it really exciting, makes it really hard because we are on legacy technology and everything is in the back end. If you're a customer looking in, you can do pretty much anything that you would want to be able to do today. You can buy glasses, you can sort out your contact lenses, you can chat to chatbots, you can do all of those things, and that's great. But in the back end, it's heavy lifting and manual processes, and what I affectionately call sticky back plastic and egg boxes. It is obviously a little bit more sophisticated than that, but it's not seamless. We're not omni-channel yet, but we know where we need to go. And there's a plan, and there's a lot of very smart people who are sort of working us towards that.
I call that sticky back plastic thing manumatic.
Is that
I call that? Or handrolic is the other one.
Yeah, handrolic. That's better. I love that, handrolic.
That's a really common challenge, that you've got legacy systems that are then holding you back. And it's kind of hard in the moment to justify investing or changing them. And it feels really invasive. But it's absolutely necessary to have something solid to build on. So how is that conversation internally about, investing in legacy and investing in those foundations?
So we actually have something that's a kind of a long-term framework of where we want to get to. And it was sort of cut short by the pandemic. I mean, as a retailer with, sort of 2,500 businesses and 40,000 staff around the globe, to physically shut the doors on your business, it was absolutely terrifying. I wasn't there, but I've spoken to plenty of people who were like, is this it? If we have to shut our doors, is this it? But it's a health need, and the doors were opened again relatively quickly. So the business was able to keep going. We are now looking at 2030. And 2030, as I said, is this kind of quite critical point for us, because it's when the millennials will be the largest cohort wearer of glasses, and we know they don't want to all shop online. So we have got to be ready for that. The legacy systems themselves are all doing a job for us, and as a retail today, they're doing that job for us, but they cannot, because they are legacy systems, and predominantly because of the way the data flows between, say, the website and our CRM systems and our stores, that the data doesn't flow terribly well. So the person who has got the worst job at the moment is our data director, who is busily just joining everything together and creating these master data lakes with all of the data that we would need. And that work is going on, and it is heavy lifting. It's requiring a lot of engineers to do it. And what's been the most difficult thing for this sort of innovative people who have been hired into the business knows that it needs to do it, and it's bringing people in, me and various other people, but it's also what we used to call at Shell, like our jam today. It's a trading business. They trade in the moment, and they can do that really successfully. They do it every day really successfully. So then it's very difficult for them to put their head up and go, we've got to kind of stop doing some of that or disrupt some of that, which is even more scary because we've just been through a huge period of disruption in order to build for this. But we are absolutely committed to it. I don't think I'm giving any state secrets away about the fact that any organisation that is as predominantly retail as Specsavers is has got to really look at that sort of acceleration of how we move to the next generation of ourselves, the Specsavers 2.0 version of ourselves. But lots of replatforming going on, lots of technology choices going on, and lots of very big bets having to be made, really with, hands tied behind backs, half blind, really, no pun intended, because what we know as marketeers is the technology's there, and you listen to technology companies and you listen to consultancy businesses. But the thing that you have to have is you have to have the customer adoption. And so there's this balancing act of, if we go too early, then we disrupt our existing business. We scale for something that isn't there yet. You maybe make some bad choices because you're scaling for something that's not there yet. Or are people going to start adopting the technology and doing things online that they just aren't doing today? When you think about it, it's 1 hour every 2 years to get your glasses, and you're wearing glasses, I'm wearing glasses. I personally can't imagine, and this is the worst marketing thing ever, that the person who's running marketing talks about themselves, but I can't imagine actually doing this online, because for me, it's my eyes, and it's 1 hour every 2 years. It's not a big deal. But I just know that the next generation are just going to be going, if I can do it online, I will, or certainly a proportion of them. And so we're going to have to be in that space. But there's a huge gamble about how many, how quickly. It's a very difficult juggling act at the moment. And they want to pay less, they want better service, they want it tomorrow. So everything has to improve with less money. It's really challenging for a successful bricks and mortar business like Specsavers to get their heads around that new world. But they are, to their credit, they really are. They're really trying.
I think people don't talk about it enough, actually, about timing, because that's really the thing that turns a transformation program or an innovation program from, I don't know, hero to zero, actually, is timing. But like you said, timing set by the customers. It's not actually something you're in control of as a business. I think there's a Hemingway quote that's gradually, then suddenly, how did you go bankrupt? Gradually, then suddenly.
Yeah.
And it's very much the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There'll be early adopters now, but there's a tipping point that comes later. And at least you have a kind of health data related line in the sand to drive you. But you just don't know exactly when it's going to happen.
No, we really don't.
And it's strategy, right? You make some bets. That's what good strategy is.
You just have to make some bets. Yeah. Educated. Yeah. Some good bets. Yeah. That's what we're going to have to do. We've got the data. What's interesting about this sector is there's not a lot. So even if you look at things like Babylon, where someone's talking about, I've got a really sore throat and, I've got like this is my symptoms and what have you, the doctor in the surgery would be removed and they would be able to listen and they would be able to diagnose. The actual optical intervention that happens is this incredibly intimate, you're on top of the person, looking into their eyes, making sure that they're that you get the right measurements when you're putting the glasses on with their pupillary distances, all those things. There's so many moments in the customer journey that require they require humans to do it, even if the machines can do it and will be able to do it well. I think it's going to be a really long time until we get to that absolutely perfect replica of a person. We are doing in Sweden, actually, there's something called teleoptometry where through your screen, because Sweden is this vast country where if you're living in parts of it, you see the 12 people that live in your village for 5 months of the year and you don't see anybody else. So if you really do need your eyes testing at that point, it's quite difficult because there aren't any optometrists. No one's going up there. So we pioneered this sort of link where there's somebody in the actual shop helping you, but they are an optometrist, and the optometrist actually is conducting the exam remotely. But you would still need to be somewhere where all the kit was, So then it's like when you have as many stores as we have, you're like, okay, that's great for remote outlying places, and that's where the technology is fantastic. But when you're living in central London, why wouldn't you just go to the local place? And it's just not like when we've looked at footwear, like shoes, things need to fit properly. It's just not like apparel. So you can look at what other trajectories have been, and you're kind of like slowly then suddenly, but it's just not the same. And even in healthcare like Babylon, the adoption of those services isn't quite the same because there's this additional layer of human interaction that's required for the most part, So I don't know. We'll see. I also have a bit like you have these phrases, like I always talk about Brad in the garage, because I always think about there's some like cool kid in a garage somewhere who's just figuring this all out and is going to, do whatever he's going to do. So that's the other bit for us, is like breakthrough, real, genuine breakthrough technology, because the technology's there today. It's been there for a while, but it's not step change, Fosby flop kind of difference that then you get the customer adoption onto it, because it's there today. You could do it today if you really, really wanted to. So yeah. Anyway,
I think it's interesting with the breadth of the network that Specsavers has, and you can have these outliers in, say, remote Sweden that you can use as a stepping stone to learn about what would a service look like, what's the limitations of it, what do those customers that are suitable for it think, can it scale? And at least it's a test bed, and it's a place to learn that will be more difficult for Brad in the garage to do that potentially than you guys with the breadth and the footprint.
Yeah. And customers are different everywhere as well. We've got markets where people just walk in and want an appointment. And so in the UK, for instance, people don't do that. that, you know, the optometrist is like a little bit like their dentist or their doctor. They assume they have to make an appointment. The thought of just swanning in Specsavers and going, can I come in and do an eye appointment? People just don't think about that. So this is one of the great things about being an international business now, is that there are things happening all over the place that then you go, oh, well, I wonder if that could work here, or what if people start doing that here? You know, so again, younger people less prone to planning and making appointments and what have you, and might feel quite fine about just wandering into somewhere. And then we'd know how to handle it because we're doing it elsewhere. I think one of the most interesting journeys that we've gone on is where you have a very successful business and you have an aging population like we have, and you just look at the huge volumes of people. So Specsavers is 50% market share in the UK and in Australia and various other countries. So it's like there's so many people who are going to need this kind of service, and so many people who are going to want to do this face to face in a store because they're older, they're 50 and they're 60, and that's just exactly what they're used to. So we could just look after them, you know. But what we've realized, of course, is we've got all these new entrants coming in. They're getting better and better. Actually, the interesting business model innovation has been they've set up as pure plays, and then they're setting up shops because they realize that as people get older, they have different needs with their glasses, and you actually have to have a bit more of a face-to-face intervention. So then those customers who've grown up in the pure play space, if the pure plays mature into retail, which is random, isn't it? But that's what's happening, then they don't ever come to us. So our customers literally die. You know, I mean, it's sad, but, you know, our customer base dies. And when you are a mass market retailer like Specsavers is, we're a volume business. It's millions of customers, you know. So you can't just look at that cohort and go, they're for us. They'll always love us. They'll be coming for another 30 or 40 years. We're going to be fine. We'll have figured it out by then. We're like, no, these guys won't ever then come to us. So because people have always sort of floated around, and then when they get to be a certain age, they come to us because they want that reassurance and best kit on the high street, you know, loads of availability of appointments, well-trained optometrists, great service, all that stuff. So they end up coming to us at that point in their lives. But we've had to make a conclusion that a great big proportion of them might not, and they're going to just stay loyal to the person who they've been with when they bought their first pair of, you know, dead easy single vision glasses when they were 25 or 30. So that's been one of the big, you know, again, like, are we for everyone? And if we're for everyone, then we've got to tackle these younger people. Or are we going to really focus eye care, optical care, hearing care for an older cohort? And the decision was no, we're not. We really don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense. And it wouldn't make sense for any business because your customer's going to die, right? So yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
And especially as there's those generations coming through actually with complex needs, there's a real opportunity there that no sensible business would turn off. So you mentioned earlier that each of the stores are a JV partner, they're a locally owned business. To what extent are they pulling digitalisation, or is it more of a push?
A great question. It's a great question because I always talk about it's the same with people, right? And it's your superpower is inevitably your super weakness, your kryptonite, right? So the partnership is the foundation on which Specsavers has launched itself successfully in every market it's gone into, because as an optometrist, you get up in the morning and you get to do what you wanted to do, which is help people change their lives through better vision, better hearing. You know, that's what you want to do. You don't want to be filling VAT receipts in and worrying about the latest, is it teacup or round, or, you know, like thinking up a strap line for your new ad. They don't want to do any of that, right? So you have this retail partner who knows about retail. You have an optometrist They own 50% and Specs owns 50%. We're 40 years old, so you know where I'm going. There's a whole group of people who have had the most brilliant career and have done the most fantastic job for Specsavers, and they're a little bit older, and they're looking at their business, and partly, do I want to change, don't I want to change? But interestingly, I think, and from the people I've spoken to, whilst they don't really want to change, what they know is if they don't change, they're not going to be able to sell their business to a 30-year-old optometrist, because will a 30-year-old optometrist buy a bricks and mortar business? So and then you've got a younger cohort of partners, because it's an incredibly voracious business in terms of its appetite. It's still opening stores all the time. And they are like, come on, where's the sort of digital version? So I don't think there's as much resistance from a strategic point of view as you would imagine there would be, because they are the superpower. But the problem always with business is it's money at the end of the day, because what I won't circle back to what I said earlier, people don't want to pay as much. If they're buying online, there's a catchment area that belongs to the partner. If I buy a pair of glasses online, I just happen to be in their catchment. Should they be paid for my glasses? And the answer currently is yes, because I would potentially go in there to get them fixed, or to get them, to maybe go and have my eye checked there, or, whatever. So no one's an orphan. They all get like appended to a store. And so I think that there's actually a lot more interest in it and desire for it than you would imagine. But but in equal measure, there's also a degree of what's that going to mean for my business. From the people I've spoken to, the partners I've spoken to, there's absolutely no resistance at all. And the reason for that, I think, is because they've seen, just with things like the online appointments, and we have this thing called on appointment triage. So you're asking people what sort of appointment. They used to do all of that on the phone, manumatic, or that's what they used to do, all of it. So that all of that time has been freed up now for them to concentrate on what's going on in the store. So I think they would look at that and say, this is a good thing, because if someone comes in and they are a 21-year-old boy and he's got a very low, very simple prescription, he's taken an appointment that a 45-year-old woman with presbyopic needs would require. And guess what? She's going to spend 300 quid and he's spending 69, or probably 29. So it makes business sense for them to have a hybrid model, and for there to be that. And that's really where we need to go with it, because lots of people do have simple needs and they don't need the intervention and spending lots of time choosing glasses and having complex conversations, when they just need a pair of very simple glasses. So I think the future's positive for the retail partner, even as a hybrid business, or whatever you call it, omnichannel business.
And there's just something behind that as you talk, which is about all boats have to rise. As someone said in a previous episode, you have to design a business model that works for everybody in the chain.
Of course. Yeah, because they're very powerful. So, if they say no, then it would be a no. So but they're not going to say no.
The other dynamic you mentioned was it being a family-owned business, in its middle age of 40 years old. How do you think that dynamic of still being owned by the founders makes it different to corporates that you've worked in, like Boots and Shell?
It's something that I had never experienced, because I've always been corporate, and I'd never thought about it. And I always think of people like Mark Zuckerberg as founders and instantly think, you wouldn't want to work for him, would you? So it's immeasurable, the difference that they're still involved, that they sit in the canteen and have their lunch together, that they genuinely care. They are optometrists through and through. They set the business up to make a difference. They get up every morning, and that's what they try and do. Profit isn't the motive at Specsavers. Helping people and transforming people's lives through sight and hearing is the absolute essence of that business. And you feel like you joined a family, and it's really weird. And when I first joined, I said, oh my God, I felt like, like on a big wedding photo, I was kind of like the fourth cousin removed's new girlfriend. So you're sort of standing there on the picture going, I seem to have joined a family. I didn't realize. But there is something about that and how much effort and energy. So Dame Mary Perkins, sends you a birthday card, handwritten birthday card, sends you a handwritten Christmas card. She writes hundreds of cards a day because she does it for everybody. It's the most, there are these tiny things that they do that you just, if you've not worked in a founder business, like I hadn't worked in a founder business, you find it really weird and odd. But then everybody who's worked there for 25 years is like, why, what's it like elsewhere? When you're there and you're presenting to the Perkins about something, and this is an expensive area, isn't it? So you're talking about millions of pounds. You do feel like, oh my God, I'm actually asking that person for money, so your commercial acuity and what am I asking for here? And is this actually a good idea? And should we really be doing this? It's massively elevated, in my opinion, because there's a person there whose money it is who you're asking for, right? And they're hugely trusting. They're optometrists and they have incredible insight. And Doug, the meetings I've been in with Doug, incredible insight, and his son, super smart guy. Both of them, know everything about that business, absolute nuts and bolts of that business. And but what they also know is they don't know what you've been brought in to talk about. So they're incredibly generous about, is this the right thing? Explain that to me. And yeah, it's been quite an experience actually going there. And now I wouldn't want to work if I for whatever reason couldn't continue to work at Specsavers. But I would always want to work in a founder business, and where the founder was there, in the building, it makes a massive difference. People turn up every day to work for the Perkins. They're green bloods, as they call them, and they are passionate. They're really zealots almost for the brand and the business. And when I joined, I was like, why aren't they Richard Branson? Like, why don't people know about the Perkins, But what I've come to understand is, A, they don't want that because they are not interested in that. But also the partners know that and the staff know that. So the actual real benefit of being a founder business and that kind of real energy and passion behind what it is you're doing, your purpose, and performing at your best for that purpose, for the business, for the family, is in the people who work there. And so the customers don't need to know, because that's what they feel when they come into the shop. When they have great experiences, it's because of the family, because everyone's working in a family business. And so I think that's, that in fact it's been quite clever for them to keep themselves out of the limelight. A, they would hate it, but B, just keep themselves out of the limelight, because it's the power of it is that the staff know, and the staff are working on their behalf every day. And it's been amazing.
That's really the power of brand purpose, rather than corporate brands going and looking for purpose, isn't it?
Yeah. And I have been in meetings where I've gone, we will make more money if they're not interested. They're like, is that the right thing for the customer? Is that the right clinical outcome? Is that what really we should be doing? And when you've worked for Shell, as we both have, potentially leaving money on the table, you'd get shot, wouldn't you? But they are not chasing the dollar. They are not chasing the dollar. And that's hugely inspiring as well, because you're making the right decisions, back to the balancing act and the should we, shouldn't we. And this is about, we want this business to be here in 40 years, 50 years. helping more and more and more customers. You have to make the right decisions. Don't make expedient decisions about this now, because this is going to be really important. And just more pressure.
More pressure to do the right thing.
There is good pressure there, isn't it, to do the right thing? It's one of the core behaviours, to do the right thing.
And so what's your biggest leadership challenge in your role then?
The biggest leadership challenge that I face, and that I think everybody faces at the moment, is this is the talent piece. Because there is a small group of people who understand what needs to happen next, and there are too few of them to go around. And when you have, it's a very mature business. There's a lot of people have worked at Specsavers a very long time, and you have to be very careful about bringing too many new people in, because that's going to dilute something that's working really well and that's really magical about the business. So you have to start growing your own, but it's not really grow your own. It's like reinvent your own, because these people are already halfway through their careers, really. And you're going to say to them, okay, I know you've been doing that, but now you're going to have to be a tech SEO expert, and I'm going to train you how to do that. And they're like, I'm a BA. Like, not anymore. So I think the biggest thing for us is to find a way to take the people that we've got today, who are good Specsavers people, solid Specsavers people, and turn them into the Specsavers 2.0 people, rather than just constantly going into the market and trying to find people who are able to do the job. And it's not easy, because these roles are technical and they're highly specialized, and marketing has become so pointy in terms of its specialisms. And I think that is one of the biggest conversations that we get ourselves into, is like, not if, but how and when are we getting our people ready for this kind of next version of ourselves. And in fact, the value that we're getting from some of our agency partners is the creation of almost like an agency Specsavers hybrid team. And the agency people, very generously in some ways, you would say, because they're kind of doing themselves out of a job, but what they know is there's so much work out there, they just really don't need to worry. But they're training our people to be as good as they are, or to be able to do the job that they're doing, and then they're moving off. So we have lots of agency people, some Specsavers people, and then it's going like this, and then they're moving on to another client or onto another piece of business, or for us into another market or whatever. And that dynamic, that marketing department 2.0 is really important for us to get that right. And again, get your future vision goggles on to figure out, who do they need to be, how many of them do we need, what do they actually need to be doing, because the work is small today. I'm sure this job must have been much easier a few years ago.
I think they were just different challenges, weren't they, to get to where it is. I think.
Yeah, there were different challenges. What were they? They were trying to decide whether to have red or white at lunchtime. I think that was the challenge.
And I think talent is one of the biggest challenges people come on here and talk about. And increasingly the conversation is, why don't we develop our own people? Just like you said, because you have people you already know they're good. They just have some skills they need to learn. And I think that's a real theme. And I think the other thing is, sort of hiring for attitude, not just individual skills, is also a kind of theme that comes through for people, because the skills are scarce.
It's really important.
And fit is hard to find in the market.
Yeah, fit. They work very hard on fit at Specsavers. It's that brilliant jerk thing you get quite a lot in technology. Not welcome. It's a very, and in a way, is that group think, and then do you just get everybody's the same and this, that, and the other? Definitely not. But there's definitely a kind of person that is working at Specsavers. And when I've been hiring, you sometimes meet people and you're like, oh, they'd be great. They're going to shake things up a bit, but they won't be successful. So it's not really very fair on them, and it's actually just a total waste of my time, I suppose. But sometimes you just think, oh, it'd be great to just get someone in to shake it up a bit, get a few feathers flying around. But that's just not gonna. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. So being really cautious is the wrong word. Just being really careful about who you bring in and how much stretch they've got, and how congruent they will be.
So let me ask you the question I ask everybody, which is, what's one lesson in your career you learnt the hard way that you wish someone had just come along and tapped you on the shoulder and told you?
So this one is easy for me because it's a little mantra of mine, which is about you can be right or be in a relationship. And going back actually to that previous point, I know that when I joined Shell, I was joined as an experienced hire and I felt under a lot of pressure to be right. And it got me absolutely nowhere with some very critically important people. And because I hadn't learned that lesson, I also took quite a umbrage to the fact that people, not only were they not appreciating that I was right, they were also appeared to be a bit annoyed with me. Whereas what I've realized as I've matured is that this world that we live in at work is just relationships, and you have to build those big relationships, and being right is kind of irrelevant until you've got those relationships in place, because just like with your husband or wife or kid or whatever, they don't want to hear that you're right. They want you to know that you love them and that they're the most important person in your world. They don't care. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I definitely, something I say to everybody I mentor or coach or whatever, when I see them getting into this, and companies are full of ESTJ, Myers-Briggs types who are I'm right, I was born right. It's so unhelpful. And particularly now, where maybe you were right even 2 years ago. Are you sure you're right now? And also being right is so fixed in the mindset that we know fixed mindset isn't all that useful anymore. You've got to be much more like yet in your mind and much more flexible in your thinking. So I think I learned that. I was on a training course and somebody said it, you can be right or be in a relationship. And I never forgotten it, because I just think it's something that if I'd learnt that a bit earlier, I wouldn't have made some mistakes that I made. And also it helps you understand, like, well, if I'm not right, maybe they're right, or maybe I am right, but they also think they're right. So it's just that self-awareness piece about stop thinking you're right all the time. And you think you're being hired for that reason. It's not. You're being hired because you've got longevity, you know how to do lots of different things, you're a great stakeholder manager, you definitely know a bit about your job. But when you get to the levels that we're at now, that's not why they hired you, So I think that's the biggest one for me.
Oh, thank you for such a lovely conversation, Carolyn. It's been so wonderful to explore your new role and what you're doing. Not so new role now.
Yeah, nearly 18 months.
And I'll be going to Specsavers again for my new specs. Good.
Everybody go to Specsavers. It's the best kit on the high street. I always tell everybody that. Best kit on the high street. And that's the thing, found a business. So it's I wouldn't go anywhere else. These lovely, look, Vivian Westwood. Can't do better.
Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Innovation Crowd. Subscribe on your favourite podcasting service so you don't miss a thing. And I'll see you next time.